I'm excited. Welcome to Juno B. My name's Becca and I'm an Aries Sun, Scorpio Rising, Gemini Moon, and today we are finally talking about the houses of the birth chart. So I'm going to separate these videos into 3 different videos so that we can talk in depth about each house. Since this is kind of like the end of the basics of the birth chart, you guys need to look back at some of my other videos and realize the things that correlate between those planets, those elements, those signs, and your birth chart. Because if I was to sit here and talk about every single placement and every single house, it would be like a 50-hour long video, and I know you guys don't want to see me talk for that long, So I have a little rig set up here, which I'll put up somewhere in this video, just to explain to you guys what the different houses are, because there's 3 different types of houses in a birth chart. We have the angular houses, which are 1, 4, 7, and 10. I'll put a little A. That's an awful A, but we're working with it. And then we have the succeedant houses, which are 2, 5, 8, and 11. So we'll put an S. And then we have the cadent houses, which are 3, 6, 9, and 12. So we'll put a little C. So as we know, each house has a true ruler, but when you look at your own birth chart, something else is most likely going to be ruling that house. So always, those houses will have the influence of their natural ruler, but then you have to compare that to what's going on in your chart. Another word for the angular houses is action. So these are the areas of your life that you like to take action in and defend. The succeedant houses are the areas of our life that we want to control. So another word for the succeedant houses is security. The cadent houses show us what areas of our life that we think a lot about and things that we desire from life. So another word for the cadent houses is learning. When we look at a natural chart, what it was at the very beginning of time, we look at what was the true rulers of these houses, and then we compare them to our natal chart. So since in this video we're just talking about houses 1 through 4, I'm going to go ahead and erase the other numbers. As we already know, and as we've talked about before, the birth chart always starts with the house on the left, right under the ascendant line. The true ruler of this house is Aries. This is the house of outer appearance, new beginnings, and our initial impulses. This is actually a very interesting house. It's also called the ascendant, and the sign that rules this house is called your rising sign. It can also be related to physical attributes, but I have a very special video coming to talk about how the rising sign may affect your personal appearance, so I'm very excited about that. We're not going to talk about it right now. But a lot of astrologers believe that you are actually born into your rising sign and develop into your sun sign over time, which is why a lot of the times people always say, oh, I don't really think that I am my sun sign. I've never identified with my sun sign. And it's probably because you haven't gotten there yet. You're working as your rising sign to develop into your sun sign. So another thing to know about the rising sign is that if there are planets in this house, that can also affect your outer appearance. So I know that there's a lot of confusion where it's like, I'm a rising Scorpio, this person's a rising Scorpio, we look nothing alike. Well, first of all, look if that house is cusping, look if there are any planets in that house, and those can also affect your outer appearance. Since the true ruler of this house is Aries, the first house will always have the influence of Aries. So when you're looking at your own chart, you can try to understand what planets, what sign is ruling that house, and how the relationship to Aries might affect your life. For instance, is Mars in your first house? If it is, Mars is the planetary ruler of Aries, so that's actually probably a very good placement. If Mars is in retrograde in the first house, that's going to have a more complicated expression because of Mars's influence over Aries. Also think about what element is happening in this first house. I'm a rising Scorpio, so having that sort of Aries influence with a Scorpio rising made me very angry a lot as a child. But now developing into my Aries self, I'm able to sort of combat that anger with understanding. As we go through these, I want you guys to let me know if you're making any correlations between your chart and these things that I'm telling you, because I know it can be kind of confusing, but if you start with your own chart, nobody knows you better than you know yourself. So that's the best way to practice. So since Aries rules the first house, and it's the house of the outer appearance, I'm going to draw a little person Yay! Now let's move on to the second house. The second house is naturally ruled by Taurus. I'm an artist. The second house is the house of wealth and possessions. We already know this to be true of Taurus, so therefore Taurus will always have influence over the second house. Different planets and finding out what sign rules this house can tell you about your relationship with money. If a fire sign rules this house, you probably want your passions to support you financially. If a water sign rules this house, you probably don't worry about money as much, and there's probably a lot of money coming in that you're not actually trying to get. Good for you. And if an earth sign rules this house, you're probably very good at understanding how to save your money. If an air sign rules this house, the idea of financial stability probably gives you a certain feeling on the inside depending on what planets are also in this house. So since Taurus rules the second house and it's the house of wealth and possessions, I'll draw a little money sign. Nice. And again, you guys have to go back to some of these other videos and sort of think about what planets are in these houses and how that affects your relationship with these areas of your life. So for instance, if Jupiter is in the second house, you probably have a lot of money. It's coming in abundantly, and that's awesome for you. Moving on to the third house, which is the house of communication. The true ruler of this house is Gemini. Nice. With Gemini ruling this house, thinking about what other signs are ruling your third house can tell you a lot about your relationship with communication. If another air sign also rules this house, the thought of communication comes very easily to you. You can think about exactly the point that you're trying to get across, but actually doing that might not come as easily. If a fire sign rules this house, you probably talk very passionately. People with fire signs that are ruling the third house are probably very good orators and very charismatic because fire and air mesh very well with each other. If a water sign rules this house, you probably speak from your emotions first, and you probably get very upset when people don't understand the emotions that you're trying to provoke in them. If an earth sign rules this house, you probably talk very bluntly and very plainly. And then obviously, if Mercury is in this house, then you probably are very, very good at communicating and getting your points across. Then if Mercury is in retrograde, it goes back to that sort of thought of the idea that you're trying to speak about and then not being able to actually say those words. Since Gemini is the true ruler of the third house, which is the house of communication, I'll draw a little like speech bubble. That kind of looks like an ice cream cone. No, it doesn't. Kind of looks like a baby chicken. I didn't think about what little pictures I was going to draw before I started making this video. And last but not least, let's talk about the fourth house, which is the house of family and is naturally ruled by Cancer. The fourth house is the house of family and the home. So it's not necessarily people that are genetically related to you. Maybe if you're adopted, your adoptive parents are just as involved in this house. If you have half brothers, half sisters that you grew up with, then they are just as involved in this house. And even if you were one of those kids who had people coming in and out of your home, it was an open door policy, those people are also involved in this house. So since the fourth house is the house of family and the home, if there's a sign that cusps on this house, that can tell you what your relationship is like to your parents. So what a cusp means is like, say that the true ruler of this house is actually Gemini. So if Gemini's over here and then like halfway through Cancer steps in, that can tell you that Cancer is on the cusp of the fourth house. So the true ruler in that case would be Gemini, with Cancer cusping that house. And if that's the case, there's probably a lot of true love involved in your family if Cancer is cusping the fourth house, and also a lot of emotional challenges. Since Cancer rules the fourth house, which is the house of the home, I'm gonna draw a little house. Okay. So now that we're done houses 1 through 4, I wanted to let you guys know that these are the formative years of your life. I believe we talked about this before, that A birth chart starts with your first breath and goes around what we deem as important throughout our lives. So starting with the outer appearance and new beginnings, because you're literally just born, it goes through the wealth and possessions, because we learn about financial need at a very young age, then how to communicate, learning how to speak, and then family and home, because it's the first thing that we love. These are the formative years of your life. They will always influence what you do, but it's really important to take a look at these to find out about your childhood. Moving forward, we're going to get into the teen years through like mid-20s, then we're going to go through old age. So I'm very excited about this. So that's it for houses 1 through 4. I'll see you next week for houses 5 through 8. If you guys have any questions, I'm always here to answer anything that you need. So feel free to direct message me or leave comments down below if anything that I said was not entirely clear. And I am always willing to answer your questions. But that's it for today's video. I post every Tuesday, except for last week. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye! House. Now, what just happened? Nothing happened. Everything's fine. The cadent houses show us what areas of our life that we desire and think about. Da, da, da. With Scorpio and Aries kind of ganging up and making a ruckus. So depending on what's going on in your birth chart, this is gonna